there are relational benefits of a farmer's market. And so those customers are getting to know the people who are growing their food, making beautiful art, and they're able to have those deeper connections in their community. And I think through a cooperative structure, you're especially attuned to that relationship and the values that market looks to embody, being a democratic organization.
Hello, I'm Maura Henn, a local food systems specialist with NCAT. And in this episode of Voices from the Field, I'm joined by Blake Lineweaver, Co-op Development Program Manager at Mission West Community Development Partners in Ronan, Montana. In this conversation, we're going to talk about the cooperative business model, especially how it pertains to farmers markets. Farmers markets are a vital local economic resource, providing access to fresh produce and incubating small businesses. They're wonderful places for communities to gather and support small farmers and local food systems, but farmers markets don't just happen. As a former farmers market manager, I can attest that a ton of organization and planning and often volunteer labor goes into making a farmer's market a success. One area of planning that can really make a big difference is deciding on how to organize the business structure of the market, which can include cooperatives. And with that, I will welcome Blake to the conversation, and let's dive in.
Thank you, Maura. It's great to be here.
So, Blake, before we really get into the nitty-gritty of cooperatives, can you share a little bit more about your role and the work of Mission West?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Mission West is a regional economic development nonprofit based in the Flathead Reservation in Northwest Montana. We support small businesses, farmers and ranchers, and cooperatives throughout our region with a range of services for starting and strengthening and scaling their enterprise. We partner with local banks to provide accessible financing packages for business owners. We offer group workshops and one-on-one support for business owners. We are also a USDA designated cooperative development center with extensive history supporting producer and consumer-owned co-ops in Western Montana and increasingly the broader region in Washington and Idaho. As a cooperative developer, I help individuals and groups explore and organize around a cooperative idea, connect them with resources and examples. And of course, my favorite part, which is sharing education about the co-op model and principles through outreach like this.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more background about Mission West and your work. And, starting any new business can be tricky. So it's great that Mission West can provide that support in our state. Can you give our listeners just a quick 101 about cooperatives and how they work and how they might be different for more familiar business models such as sole proprietorships or LLCs?
Yeah, sure thing. So cooperatives are jointly owned and democratically controlled businesses that are formed to meet the economic, social, and cultural needs of their member owners. So like LLCs or an S-Corp, a cooperative is a legal business structure that is defined by state statutes. Here in Montana, for example, we have two statutes for most co-op formation. There's a Chapter 17 statute that is only for the formation of farmer-owned co-ops, which affords them some certain rights and protections in regards to federal antitrust laws, taxes, and issuing securities. The other statute, a Chapter 15 co-op, is applicable to co-ops of any ownership structure, which could be consumers, workers, or a combination thereof, which we would call multi-stakeholder. And given that kind of flexibility, there are co-ops of all kinds here in Montana and everywhere that you participate in the economy. These include grocery store co-ops, credit unions, also utility and telecommunication co-ops, and even your favorite farmer's market might be a co-op. And what really sets co-ops apart is that every single one, no matter where it's located or its size or sector, is rooted in the internationally recognized 7 cooperative principles, which really put the democratic ideals of a co-op into practice and help them flourish and operate successfully.
Yeah, that's just so cool. I have been learning that almost anything can become a co-op. For instance, I recently became a member of a podcast cooperative to support the creators that are making their shows, and it's based in California. So it's just so neat to see that it's a model that can be so adaptable. So, in addition to managing a farmer's market, like I said at the top of the show, I also worked for a cooperative grocery store in the Midwest. So, I have definitely seen firsthand the ins and outs of cooperative operations. And one thing that was really clear was there was a lot of communication needed between the co op leadership, its members, the board, customers, and even their workers, which is great. Communication is important, but it also takes a lot of work. So, for those who might be wondering, why take on those extra steps of forming a cooperative? What are some of the benefits of cooperatives, of forming a farmers market cooperative, or really any cooperative for that matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just say that I love my co-op grocery store back in Iowa, which is where I'm originally from. And it was my first experience with co-ops, and really just the wide community benefits that a co-op offers. And you're spot on there that like it's the clear and consistent communication is so key for a co-op success. And while some may see that as a challenge, I believe, and a lot of folks in the cooperative community would agree, that it can be a real driver for innovation and community-driven solutions, especially here in Montana, in Iowa, and the Midwest, where rural communities really benefit from co-ops. Being that they create economic opportunity where conventional businesses may not typically invest. Co-ops pool resources and market demand, and those individuals and businesses that would be members of that business or even be customers of it can gain access to higher quality and often more affordable products and services that they otherwise couldn't. And specifically for farmers markets, it's important to know that the business structure a market adopts does matter, and it affects everything from liability and management to the way decisions are made, the market's eligibility for grant funding and donations, how the market uses volunteers, and tax considerations, of course. A cooperative is a great choice for those who value a democratic approach and want to share in the decision-making process. So we typically see these as vendor-owned markets where, like all farmers markets, small and micro enterprises get a foothold in their local marketplace. They can test a product and they build their brand without the costly investments of time and money if they were to do it on their own. And, this just really came home for me in a recent conversation with a co-op market manager here in Ronan, actually. He shared that the market could be seen as a collective pool of funds for marketing the whole group, where, if each one of those vendors were to create a website or create a market presence online, it just takes a lot of investment. So through that cooperative structure, the vendors who pay their membership in the co-op get to reap the benefits of the whole. And they participate in a one-member, one-vote decision-making process by creating and improving vendor applications and so on and so forth of how that market would operate.
Yeah, thank you. I have seen all of those things play out in the cooperatives that I have either worked for or been a member of. And I was just reading that, and these numbers might be a little out of date, but looks like maybe there's somewhere around 30,000 cooperatives, not including housing cooperatives in the United States. So, and it seems like it's really a sector that is growing and getting more and more, definitely getting more interest. I feel like we're seeing more cooperatives taking hold in Montana. So let's say I'm on the steering committee to develop a new farmers market in my community, or even on the board of directors of a well-established market. What are some of the factors that we should consider about incorporating as a co-op? How would we know if the co-op is a right fit for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the important elements of this would be looking around the room and seeing who's coming to the table. if it's likely that vendors are the ones who are driving the direction of the market, you might already be operating in a cooperative manner, but might not be using the cooperative business structure. Some co-ops work with a local nonprofit. The nonprofit operates as a fiscal agent for the market. And that can be a really healthy partnership. But in some cases, a nonprofit or a sponsoring organization may not have capacity to continue running the farmers market. And in that case, the vendors might take it upon themselves to continue operating the market. And so that's where we've seen some markets find forming a cooperative to actually be an easier structure than forming a nonprofit 501c3, for example. And that just makes sense because the vendors are the ones who are driving the direction. They have already established relationships with one another, and they're eager to participate in that democratic decision making. So I would say it's really the motivation and the passion of the people who are seeking to benefit from the market that would guide you towards cooperative formation.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about some of the resources that are available for making that transition. But before we talk about that, can you talk a little bit about, what are those steps to forming a cooperative or a farmers market cooperative?
Yeah, definitely. So here at Mission West, we have kind of 4 different phases, you could say, of cooperative organizing or cooperative development. The first one there, kind of just hinted at it, is organizing. So at this point, you might have 1 or 2 people who have an idea of working together with others to address a need that would be better addressed, as a whole, as opposed to one person taking on all of that work, all of the labor, and the very costly investments of starting a business, as you have alluded to earlier. And in that phase, you really want to hone in on what exactly is that idea, what service or product is it looking to provide. Specifically in a farmer's market, it's that market access. You really hone in on that. You get a group together. Usually there's a community interest meeting, potentially. It might start more informally. But yeah, you're really starting to get the people who are passionate about seeing that project move forward. From there, you'd move more into the planning stages. This is where you would hone in on where exactly would that market exist. Is it, what street is it on? Is it in a park? Some of the logistical decisions there. Is there really the market demand for this particular project? It might be you only have a few vendors who are interested, and there's just not necessarily the need for it. And so in the planning stages, you really want to dive into the feasibility of the co-op in question. If you've passed that feasibility and everything's looking good, then you would move into an implementation phase. So this is where you would incorporate the cooperative under a particular statute. So in Montana, it would be either that Chapter 15 or Chapter 17, depending on the membership structure. You would, create your articles of incorporation under those statutes and your bylaws. And the bylaws are really what are the guiding policies, the initial policies between the co-op and its members. So you would really hone in on those instrumental documents. And then you move into the 4th stage, which is sustaining. And co-ops really thrive when that passion and energy that originally brought the idea forward is sustained. And so you have members and board of directors, even the employees and customers who are constantly being engaged in the co-op's success. So that what that can look like might be doing strategic planning with the board. Always, you have like your regularly scheduled meetings, but then what does the strategic future look like for the co-op? So you're always engaging membership and seeing, what are their needs and are they evolving over time? So that's really, the key focuses of that sustaining period are always engaging, always having a growth mindset. Is really what makes a co-op successful in the long run.
Yeah. As you're talking through that, it really strikes me that those 4 key areas are really in alignment with just starting a farmer's market. The organizing, determining if there's interest, if there is, then moving into the planning and then the implementing and the sustaining, like those are all super important to just making sure that a farmer's market in general is successful, regardless of what its business model is. I'll just mention that NCAT has a resource for Montana farmers markets for our network, but it's really, we have sourced resources from our partners all across the country. So I'll make sure to add the farmersmarketmt.com website in our show notes for those who are maybe looking at starting a market. And really, as you're like doing that organizing and planning piece, deciding on a business structure is just so baked into that. So this is a great time to kind of think about maybe, if you do have enough vendors to support a cooperative, like maybe that's a good decision. So we're both in Montana, and we have a few different organizations that can help with cooperative development, including Mission West, which I know is, one of the functions of helping, a new group thinking about transitioning to a co-op. You might have a co-op developer come in and kind of talk through some of these things, like some of the things that we're talking about here. For those listeners who are in other locations outside of Montana, are the steps to forming a cooperative different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said earlier, co-ops are formed under their state statutes, and so that can look very different depending on your state. And I'm most familiar with Montana, but it would be most important to reach out to a cooperative development center in your state or in your region. There are some cooperative development centers who serve a broader region than just their state. So they really have that in-depth knowledge and the connections to helping groups, navigate those legal structures and find the one that's right for their context. And then there are some cases as well where a co-op can incorporate under another state statute. So, for example, you might be a co-op in Idaho, for example, which I'm a little bit more familiar with. They actually don't have a statute specifically for co-ops like we have here in Montana. And so it might be, in their case, helpful to look at Montana or another state to incorporate under. So it's just important to find those resources who has that legal knowledge in your region and contact them because they're a great place to start. And you might look at Cooperation Works, which is a national network of cooperative developers, and they have a great map for finding the cooperative development center in your region.
That's great. That's such a great resource. I didn't know about the map. So we'll make sure to add that in the show notes as well. And I'll also give a plug to the Farmers Market Legal Toolkit, which has a ton of great information about starting a market, doing different programs at the market, as well as a whole section about picking a business structure, including cooperatives. So we'll make sure to add that as well. So yeah, I'd love to kind of move into talking about some real world examples. I know Mission West has helped farmers markets establish as cooperatives, as well as help form a very successful growers co-op and CSA. Can you talk a little bit about how those businesses are doing and just, maybe any other success stories or examples that you might have from your experience with working with Mission West?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mission West, we've been engaged in cooperative development for over 25 years. We were one of the first cooperative development centers in the country. And really our work has been invested in growing local food economies in Western Montana and across the region. So one of our first groups that we worked with was a group of producers here in Western Montana to look at what were the aggregation, distribution, and marketing services that they were all looking for. And so through some different iterations of that project, they are now the Western Montana Growers Co-op based in Missoula and have over 40 members and are increasingly, expanding local food access through institutions like schools and grocery stores and universities, colleges, and the like. So, that's been a long-term partnership with a cooperative development center and a co-op where we're seeing a lot of growth and interest. And then here in Ronan, specifically with farmers markets, we, back in 2017, were awarded a farmers market promotion program grant. We saw there was a farmers market here in town where it was a volunteer run market. And that particular person was looking to retire and really transition the market into a more sustainable model. And so over 3 years, we really worked on developing that farmers market and the vendors, relationships with one another. And from that particular project, they formed a cooperative, the Ronan Farmers Market Co-op. And so since then, we've been working with them to continue to grow and hone their presence, which is right off of Highway 93. So it's a great place to stop by Thursday evenings during the summer months and pick up local produce, but also baked goods and other creative projects that they have there. So that's one market that we work with here close to home. We're also very lucky to have several other cooperative farmers markets throughout Western Montana. There's the Polson Farmers Market just north of us. They're actually the oldest farmers market co-op that we have in the region. There's the Big Fork Farmers Market just north of Flathead Lake. And then on the south side of the region in Hamilton is one of the largest farmers markets that we have in the area. And they're also a cooperative model. So it's really fascinating to see, these different towns kind of different sizes and obviously, kind of different flows of consumer bases. All see the benefit of that cooperative model. And, I definitely encourage anyone who is driving throughout Western Montana to visit one of those farmers markets, ask the vendors, are they a member of their co-op? And if they are, what benefits do they see from it? Because that's really going to look different from each vendor to vendor.
Oh, that's so great to hear. I knew that we had cooperative farmers markets in Western Montana, but I honestly didn't realize that we had so many. I knew about Hamilton, and it's very heartening and exciting to hear, because in some of my other farmers market capacity building work in Montana, we've been brainstorming how can we work more regionally with markets and getting because we are so spread out. Western Montana markets are a little bit closer together, but in other parts of the state, it can be challenging to have enough resources to support a market or to pay a market manager. So we've been thinking about how can we get markets that are maybe in more rural areas to work cooperatively, even if they're not forming a co-op right off the bat. And having so many examples in Western Montana is just going to make such a great case study to, we're really seeing it being successful, it seems like. Yeah, that's so great. And now I just kind of want to turn towards the consumer side of things. And this is kind of a tricky question, but why would someone want to choose to support a cooperative as a customer? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'll get to that. I just wanted to talk a little bit too about the case study. I just wanted to mention that Mission West has a case study on cooperative farmers markets, and I can definitely share that with you to put in the notes there. But it really dives into the history actually of some of those farmers markets that I mentioned. So great resource there. Yeah, a lot of collaboration among those markets. So. But yeah, why would a customer want to support a farmers market cooperative? I think, the answer to that, like, customers want to support farmers markets for all sorts of reasons. One, because they want to support local businesses. They want to ensure that they have access to local items, right? Like going to the grocery store, that produce has traveled, in some cases, hundreds of miles to get there. How convenient it is to have local food access right downtown. It was grown, just miles away. So having that access is so crucial for the customer, especially. But I also feel there are relational benefits of a farmer's market. And so those customers are getting to know the people who are growing their food, making beautiful art, and they're able to have those deeper connections in their community. And I think through a cooperative structure, you're especially attuned to that relationship and the values that market looks to embody, being a democratic organization. And so also that customer, by supporting those market vendors, their whatever profits that market generates, the vendors then decide democratically how that's invested to continue to grow the market. So that might be a little bit different from like a nonprofit structure or an LLC, where you're really putting that power in the place of just one or maybe a couple of people or folks that aren't direct beneficiaries of the market. So a customer supporting that is really leaning into those values and the growth of the market directly for the benefit of those members.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a values-based reason to be a co-op supporter as a customer. And I don't know if this is the case for any of the current cooperative farmers markets that we have in Montana. But as you and I both know, having, either worked or shopped at a cooperative grocery store, often co-ops will also open their membership up to customers. So the co-op I worked for, we relied heavily on the number of members that we had to support, and basically they became member owners. And so they have an investment. Kind of the messaging we would give is, it's a community-owned grocery store. It's a member-owned grocery store. So I'm not sure if any of the farmers markets have explored opening up membership to customers, but maybe that's something that could be looked at down the road to even have more of that community support and investment. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I don't believe any of the farmers markets that exist in Western Montana have that consumer class, but I know some have talked about it. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh, that's good to know. Something to keep our eye out for in the future. Blake, I'm just wondering if you have, we've already chatted a little bit about some resources that we're going to share. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any resources, books, or podcasts, anything that you think our listeners should know about?
Yeah, I think those resources that you had mentioned earlier are great places to start, especially if you're a farmer's market customer or a manager looking to create a farmer's market in your town or region. Specifically for co-ops, I think there are so many great podcasts and books out there that you could dive into. One of my favorite podcasts is the Everything Co-op podcast and radio show. That's at everything.coop. They bring in a wide array of speakers to talk about co-op models across the country. So I think if you're a podcast geek, that's a great place to start. There is a book called Cooperatives at Work. We're really seeing a growth in employee ownership and worker-owned co-ops across the country right now. So if you're looking for a book, Cooperatives at Work is a great one. Of course, I'll plug Mission West's website. We have some cooperative information on there. And of course, reach out to either us at Mission West if you're in our region, or look at Cooperatives at Work, I should say, to their website to find a cooperative developer in your region. We're always here to, help co-ops and that are existing, but also, to help co-ops get their start. So we're always, eager to talk about different ideas and share resources and connect.
Oh, great. I'm always looking for new podcasts to check out. So I will definitely be checking out that one about co-ops. How fun. We'll make sure to list all of those in the show notes. As we're kind of winding down our conversation, I'm wondering if there's, just like one thing that you would recommend that anyone could do to support farmers markets.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think most of our audience is probably consumers. So find the farmers market in your region, right? And go to them, support them, get to know these vendors and know that, and let them know that they are valuable and important for their local community. So I think that's a great place to start. And also, find other ways of supporting your farmers market. If they are looking for volunteers or donations, I guess, either of their time or other, treasures and talents, then definitely give that forth. There are quite a few, rural farmers markets that I know of here in Montana, and I'm sure you're familiar with too, Maura, that would greatly appreciate that extra hand. So definitely find, who's the market manager, who's organizing, because they would always appreciate that extra hand.
Oh my gosh, yes. That makes me think about when I was a market manager, we definitely had kind of our deep fans, like our big fans of the market who would just hang out, like they'd shop, but they'd just hang out during the entire time. And they would also, if it like started to storm or, get really windy or whatnot, they were like there to offer, like just like getting not just helping me, but even helping other vendors, like, quickly, tear down their tents and get things into trucks. So, I mean, it's always so nice to like see that community support. And I completely agree. Like just going to a market, shopping, like that is such a great way to let your vendors know, to let your local farmers know that like their work matters. Who does not want to get that affirmation? Like we all love to know our work matters. So I think that's a great suggestion. So, all right. Well, Blake, thank you so much. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted to chat about?
No, I think that was about it. Thank you so much, Maura, for having me on the call today. And I'm so excited for farmers market season to kick up. And I think there are just so many great opportunities to connect with your local food system. And I'm so excited that we have these cooperative farmers markets and that we can, find ways of participating. I think it's more important now, more than ever.
I totally agree. Well, thank you so much, Blake. And I really enjoyed our conversation today.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.